person, I can hook you up with her. So just let me know. So we're going to, let me see. I'm going to go through and I'll call your name. Please wait until I call your name and verify. So now let's talk a little bit about the icebreaker. You can respond by entering your comment in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and share. How do you make sure that you have the time to do the things you love?
You want us to answer those questions?
I want you to answer, how do you make sure you have time to do the things you love?
Just make sure you schedule it and do it.
Schedule it, okay.
That's what I was going to say. I have to make a schedule to make sure I have time to sit down and play the piano. I just make time I have time to do that.
Okay. Heather, I see. Oh, go ahead.
I was like, somebody said I don't. Kima said I don't. Renee said prioritize. I kind of identify with Kima. Jessica said sometimes have to disconnect from everyone. Trisha said time management, but I'm bad at that. I'm with Trisha there too. Chelsea said stay up late or get up earlier. Okay, I can do the stay up late, but getting up earlier, nope. Robin, you just have to do it. Dion said get up early. Samantha said task list my day. And Paula said try to block off and schedule time. Doesn't always work out.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, there was something there I was gonna, Heather and Renee, what are your favorite things to do outside of work?
I enjoy reading, and when I have money, traveling. Sitting on the beach is my all-time favorite.
Being with family, taking care of grandkids.
Okay, so how did you all learn what you enjoy doing?
I taught myself to play the piano when I was young. My sister got to take lessons and I didn't. So I would just, listen to her lessons and I would teach myself. And then I started playing for my church and then it just went on from there. And I just enjoy sitting and playing.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Kelsey
how did you guys learn?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Kelsey said my mom taught me growing up.
Mine's grew on me.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
Mine's grew on me.
Oh.
I was always in the kitchen with my grandmother and my mother.
Aw. Okay, we've got a couple of people that said self-taught in the chat. All right, now the last debriefing question. How can we learn what children are interested in doing?
I
By
think
watching them play.
Yeah.
Watch them play.
That's what I started to say, was watching them play, but just watching them to see what they're interested in. And then if you don't know, like at school, a lot of times they'll be talking about shows that they like to, and I don't watch those shows. So I have to watch them to kind of see what they're interested in. And,
Yeah.
So, but I've learned a lot because I have grandbabies every weekend now. So, and they're about those same ages. So you just kind of have to
Awesome.
be observant.
Okay. Heather, you want to share some of the ones in the chat?
Sure. Lauren said listen and play with them. Samantha said ask them. Jessica also said ask them and observe. Kima said paying attention to them. Kelsey said watching them, talking to their families. Paula said observing them. Robin said by asking them. Dion said observe them. Renee said observation, communication with them.
Hey, thank you guys. So let's talk briefly about what you hope to learn tonight by attending this class. And again, you can either unmute yourself and share, or you can type in the chat.
I just hoping to learn to be more
Sorry.
effective at writing lesson plans and just learning new things, new ways to do things.
Okay, thank you.
For me, I kind of just learned on the job last year, or learned from what previous teachers had did. And I kind of want to learn from a setting like this also, of different
Okay.
ways to do things.
Sorry, guys, my allergies have been killing me.
Ready for me to share a few?
Yes, thank you.
Robin said everything. Kelsey said how to write out a lesson plan. Trisha said ideas to make lesson planning easier and new ideas. Dion said more and different ideas. Samantha said how to stick to the lesson plans created. Well, that kind of doesn't always work.
Yeah.
Kima Dean said learning how to do lesson planning. Paula said trying not to overthink the ELGs. And Jessica said learn more than what she knows now.
Okay, I'm making some notes so we can kind of go back and see what, if we met most of your needs. I will say you're definitely not going to learn everything tonight. Paula brought up something that I always say about overthinking. I think the biggest problem with lesson plans is people overthink them and make them harder than they are. So my objectives for tonight are to learn about planning and implementing appropriate activities and learn about incorporating children's interests into the curriculum, which is why we started talking about what we like to do and how we find out about what children like to do. Because the best lesson plan and the best curriculum is going to build on their interests. And sticking to lesson plans. Sometimes the best thing you can do is deter a little from what's going on if the children aren't engaged. So let's talk briefly about why do we need to plan for the children?
Well, having a plan kind of keeps you focused on what you want them to learn, what they're going to be learning. And even though it's just a guide, it's not something that's set in stone. So if you have a plan, then you're going to be more effective of completing those tasks that you want them to learn. So
Great. Anybody else? Kima put in the chat that she does overthink and makes it harder for herself. Jessica said routine is good for small children. And Trisha said having a plan is a helpful starting point. Sorry, Heather, I just jumped in there and read those.
That's
I'm
okay.
not used to having somebody else in here with me. So let's look at some reasons why we need the lesson plan. We need to ensure we know what we'll be doing, because if you, oh, that's a great point, Samantha. Plans help avoid dead time, which can create challenging behavior. Ensure you know what you'll be doing, because if you don't have a plan, then you don't know what you need for the day and you're not ready. And make sure you have the materials you need. We want good results with the children. We want to have appropriate and responsive activities. We need to address standards and expectations like the early learning guidelines or the school standards. Plus, we can share with families and colleagues what we're doing. Some of the things you might need to plan your lessons: your objective observations. You can use your observations to plan activities. One of the new QRIS requirements for some of the STARS levels is that you do some individual planning for each child. Well, you'll be able to do that if you have observations and can plan certain things for that child. early, and I'm in a little bit, I'm going to go to the CECPD website and show you some tools that are there for you to use. Early learning guidelines for infants, toddlers, and 2s or 3 to 5. Or if you're working with school agers, you might want the Oklahoma Academic Standards. Obviously, something to write with and write on. Blank lesson plan form or a lesson plan book. And even if you're using a pre-planned curriculum, it still requires planning. You have to make sure you have the materials you need ready. You have to make sure it's appropriate for the children. Has anybody ever had a pre-planned curriculum and you've run across an activity or activities that is not at all appropriate for the children? Does that happen to anybody besides me? I see Heather nodding her head.
Yes, because I believe in process art, and a lot of those actually have product art.
Yes.
Where they want to put a specific end to an art project.
Okay, and then you may need to add early learning guideline informations to it. If you're participating in the STARS program, you'll have to add the early learning guidelines information to your lesson plans. What are some appropriate plans and activities for children? How do we make sure that what we're doing is appropriate? Any thoughts?
Well, we use teaching strategies, and of course it always has, but you have objectives and you just kind of see what your activities are in the school readiness goals. We have to match ours up with those. So we have to make sure that it's age appropriate and that the outcome is, what we're looking for in those lesson plans. So whatever activity we put on our lesson plan, we have to put an objective with it, and kind of with the early learning guidelines and all those, we have to kind of put those all together. So, and yeah, sometimes, we just, if they're not age appropriate, then you're going to have difficulties with the children trying to get those activities finished. And not that we don't want to challenge some, but you still have to kind of know your children and know where they're at.
Right. What about inappropriate? What are some inappropriate things for young children? Heather already mentioned one. Using only product art, or no, yeah, product art. I said that right, yes. Or basically crafts, closed-ended with a certain outcome.
Color sheets.
Color sheets. Now, we had a conversation about this after the last time I taught this class. I will say this. I think there's a lot of gray area with that. I don't think the only thing you should have available for children is coloring books, but I also know there's a lot of children that do like coloring. So I think there can be like a balance, if that makes sense.
I agree with that.
But don't get onto them if they color it, like if they color a tree purple or they get outside the lines. I'm telling you, I'm 56. I've never ever colored in the lines in my life. So, and anybody that knows me knows I color outside the lines all over my life. So let's look at a couple of things. Appropriate means we remember children learn at varying rates. We remember that children are active learners. They learn through play. They need to practice the skills they've learned, and they learn through active engagement and concrete experiences. Inappropriate is abstract methods of teaching, worksheets, lectures, drills on isolated skills. An age-appropriate theme for young children meets their interests where they are and is concrete and something they can or have actually experienced. Good curriculum plans meaningful experiences that are stimulating, invites exploration and investigation, provides a rich variety of materials, challenges, and ideas that are worthy of children's attention, presents opportunities for children to make choices, and gives children long blocks of time to engage in sustained play. And those long blocks of time to engage in sustained play are very important because that helps develop those attention spans that they're going to need when they go to school. So they need long blocks of time to engage in their play. We need to make sure that we pay attention to individual needs and differences. Remember that learning goals may vary from child to child. And it doesn't even mean like you can plan the same activity for all of the children, but you may have a different goal in mind for several different children. Remember children with special needs. And this includes both advanced children who may need more challenges and children with delays who may need modifications. And you need to learn each child's way of going about tasks because they each have their own way of doing things, just like you have your own way of doing things. You know, what works for me when I'm planning something might not work for you, and that's fine. There isn't a set way to do things. So when you're choosing a theme or a big idea or a topic, make sure it's interesting, both to the children and to you. If you pick a theme that is not interesting to you, how do you think the children are going to react to it? Are they going to feel your disinterest?
Yes.
They're going to notice, and they're going to pick up on your disinterest. You want to make sure that whatever you choose is accessible, that you can provide real, frequent, and hands-on experiences with it, that it's important and worth knowing about to a young child. It's the right size, not too big and complex, but also not too small and trivial, and that is consistent with program philosophies and goals. You want to choose a topic or a theme that can be taught through direct experience, that builds understanding and appreciation of themselves, others, and the world around them. That integrates experiences, subjects, and development, that is realistic in terms of what you have available, and has lots of ways to involve families and encourage family input and participation. So let's brainstorm some ideas for possible themes or curriculum topics. Now, a couple of things before we start this. Number one, don't be insulted, or please try not to be insulted if I question you or have questions about or comments about your idea. I'm just trying to help you think. Avoid like things like ABCs and 1, 2, 3s and colors. Those kind of things should be automatically integrated into what you're doing. You know, you don't have to have, I mean, you can, but you don't have to have a letter of the week or a color of the week, because you can naturally integrate that into what you're doing. Does that make sense? So what are some themes or big ideas? And remember, they need to be relevant to the children and something they can or have actually experienced. So what are some ideas?
Well, we do studies at our school, and so we've
Okay.
done studies like trees or clothing. Simple machines was one of their favorites to figure out all these simple machines and how they work and what is a simple machine.
Oh, I love that.
So
Yeah.
there's some really fun things in there, and the kids have been really interested. Now, what we've found is that they're 6-week studies, and sometimes they're too long. So we've kind of cut them back a little bit. But I think simple machines is probably one of their, and the recycling is one of their favorite: reuse, reduce, and recycle. So those are a few that we've used.
Thank you.
Feelings and emotions.
Feelings and emotions.
You want me to read some of they put in this?
I would love that. Thank you.
Okay, Tricia said life cycles. Kelsey said gardening. Lauren said weather or seasons. Jessica said bugs was also one the kids liked. Lauren said insects, spiders, and ladybugs. And since she was talking about specific things, like also we talked about boxes because kids love boxes, the simplest things.
Mm-hmm.
And Kima said friendship, which is great.
Right. You guys have some great ones. And you know, what's going on around them. Like one year when they were doing some work over at the school. I live right across the street from the school here in Pond Creek, and they were doing some work over at the school. Well, they were tearing down the building. So there was lots of big equipment for us to go out and watch them, you know, do. Then they were building. So there was lots of noises and things for us to observe. We've had like the city guys come that were working on electricity outside, and we'd go out and watch them up in the bucket truck. So all of that stuff, the things that are going on around them, that's what's going to catch their interest. That's why bugs, weather, life cycles, all of that stuff catches their attention, because they're really experiencing it. They see it going on around them. Any others you guys want to add?
Community helpers.
Community helpers.
Fire safety.
Fire safety.
Stranger danger.
Stranger, yeah. And that's such a, the stranger danger. What?
Deborah, can you repeat what you said? We didn't catch it.
Thanks, Heather.
Farming. What happens on the farm?
Farming.
Farming,
Yeah,
okay.
great.
Yes, and especially in rural communities, because they see a lot of that. And then that goes back to, you know, it needs to be something that they actually can experience or can see, because that's very, you know, very topical around where I live, because we can watch combines and tractors and, you know, all kinds of things around us. Whereas somebody who lives in a heavily populated area may not see some of that, but they're going to see buses and, I mean, I know not in Oklahoma, but subways and buses. And doesn't Oklahoma City have like a streetcar now in downtown Oklahoma City? And so, you know, things that we're not going to see here in Pond Creek. So use your observations, and you can do that in a couple of different ways. You can observe a child engaged in something and offer something that can extend their play. You know, if you see a child really engaged in, say, doing an art project, and you say, hey, I've got this, you know, it's here if you want it. Or you see a child that is wanting to learn to tie their shoes. You can add some things to the classroom or to your childcare home that help them practice doing that. You know, it could be things like a big shoe they can put on over their foot to try practice tying, different things. If you're in a mobile infant class and you have a mobile infant in your childcare home and you see them starting to pull up and creep around, then you want to make sure you have things in your environment that encourages that. And then over time you see where the child might need specific challenges to meet their goals and to determine the child's interests. So how do you build on children's interests?
Well, you find out what they're interested in, and then you find activities or toys or something that's going to enhance those and play along with them. I mean, we find sometimes children don't know how to play with certain toys or how to do different things. And so we're going to begin by working with that, and then they soon become interested. But if you know what they're interested in, then you're going to provide activities that's going to promote that.
Right. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier about how we find out about what they're interested in, talking to them, observing them, talking to their families. And Robin mentioned in the chat, letting them tell a story and act out a story. Children's interest, we learn about them through observations, through conversations, and through talking to parents. And remember, for a lot of children, this is kind of a big term for basically helping build on a child's skills. But new abilities are first developed in collaboration with an adult or more competent peer. And Vygotsky called that the zone of proximal development. So that means that, you know, sometimes a peer closer to their age can be better at teaching them or helping them learn how to do something than an adult can. And that's, you know, that's fine. And the reason is because they're closer to their range. They, you know, they remember what it was like not to be able to do it. Scaffolding, you know, use what you know about the child and plan an activity that uses their interest to build on skills. And we do this all the time without even really thinking about it. And so now you're going to be aware and intentional. And I already kind of touched on this, but an example of a mobile infant who's starting to pull up, things you might add to the environment. A preschooler that's wanting to learn to tie their shoes, what are things you might add to the environment? And so you already do that all the time without thinking. You see them expressing an interest in something and you build on that. And the big fancy word for that is scaffolding. And I like big fancy words because they show how smart you are and that you know what you're doing. And it helps show the others, and that might be parents, observers, that you know what you're doing when it comes to young children.
Can I add on to that thought, Tracy?
No, I'm just kidding. Of course you can.
It helps validate childcare providers as educators, growers of
Yes.
brains, and not just your unfavorite word, babysitters.
Oh, sorry. Heather knows that's a trigger word for me. She just wanted to see me get mad. So when you have like a lesson plan theme idea or a you know, a starting place for your plan, there's different ways to brainstorm ideas. What are some things that you use already when you're brainstorming for lesson plans?
Kelsey said lists. She makes
That's a
lists.
great one. Anybody else?
We, of course, we have ours are kind of set in stone with our curriculum, but we have questions of the day. So we think about questions and what's going to go along with those questions and activities we can go so they'll answer those questions. But we also make a list of all the different things, activities, and what we're going to put in which area, and just kind of go from there. But we kind of, since we do studies, everything's kind of laid out for us, but then we add things to those. But the questions of the day that goes with that curriculum, that goes with whatever studying is, that gets those kids thinking, and they have to answer, and we write down their, their thoughts of what they're saying. We write down on the list of what they're saying and what they want to learn and what they want to get out of it. And it's really effective. So.
And a really good study, as Wava called it, or curriculum plan, if the children are engaged in it, it doesn't have to end after 1 week. It can keep going as long as they are interested. Let's see. Trisha put in the chat previous lesson plans, peers, and the internet. Those of you that have been around a long time, who remembers before the internet when you had to do lesson planning and find songs and stuff without the internet? I mean, it is so, it's kind of a balance. It can be so much simpler, but on the other hand, it can also be very overwhelming. And then somebody mentioned, Paula mentioned webbing, which I'm going to show you guys my beautiful web here. I use webbing a lot when I'm planning classes out, like trainings like this. I actually didn't use webbing that much when I was doing childcare, but I use it a lot more now. And the great thing about webbing is you take your big idea and you put it in the middle, and then you just brainstorm out ideas. So let's take one of the ones that we talked about earlier. Somebody mentioned trees. So if you put trees in the middle of a web, what are some things you might web out from that?
Different types of trees, so they can figure out what kinds of leaves they have, or
okay, different types of trees, leaves. What else?
What grows on trees?
What grows on trees? What else?
Animals that live in the tree.
Animals that live in the trees. What else?
What you make out of trees.
What do you make out of trees? What else?
How trees grow, or what do you need to make a tree grow, or
yep. So let's just take one of those. Animals that live in trees. Can you even web out from that?
Yes.
What kind of animals live in trees?
Birds and squirrels and
insects. I'm sure there's insects.
Yes.
Did you say frogs?
Sloths. But trees do. Tree frogs do too.
Yep. Red-eyed tree frog. Praying mantis. Spiders. So do you see how just the simple trees could expand to be a huge curriculum, a huge study, and theoretically could go on for much longer than a week if you take the time to map out all those things, build on them, explore them. And in a minute, I'll show you like I like just doing my own web like this. The ones, there are printable ones that you can find if you go to a search engine and put them in. There are printable ones. My problem with those is my handwriting is too big to write in those little bitty dots. So I like just doing my own. So now what I would like you to do is get your own piece of paper and pencil and decide on your topic or your curriculum theme that you want to use for your lesson plan. Another thing about webbing, you can use your early learning guidelines and observations for inspiration. So like if you're planning, if you're webbing out some ideas, you can flip through the early learning guidelines, look for some ideas, look through your observations. Who is already familiar with what a KWL chart is? Put a yes if you are or a no if you're not in the chat. Okay, I see some yeses and some nos. Okay, so a KWL chart, these are a great tool to use with children to stir their interest in a topic and find out what they already know about the topic, what they want to learn about the topic, and then as a wrap up, what they did learn. And here's an example. And again, I just went and searched this on the internet. So you can go find one on the internet. When I was doing them with kids, I always just made my own on a piece of paper. But the K stands for what they already know about the topic. The W stands for what do they want to know? What do they want to learn? And then the L is your wrap up after you finish the topic and the study. What did they learn? What kind of things have they learned? So, before we go to the next thing, we're going to do our own web in a minute. Before we do that, though, is there are there any questions about? First of all, let me say, you don't have to do a web. If that doesn't resonate with you, you do what works for you. Make a list, make an outline, scribble notes, you know, I draw pictures, I don't care. It's got to work for you. But what hold on just a second. I don't think so. Sorry, I just had somebody enter the waiting room. I'm like, no. Well, good grief. Sorry, my computer is acting like a weirdo. And I've lost you guys. I can't see you. I can't see anything. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, where was I? Whatever you do has to work for you. So I want you to make sure that whatever you do for your plan, do you already have a topic in mind? Write yes in the chat, or if you do, no if you don't. And if you do have one,
Yes.
do you want to share yours? Do you want to share what your topic is? Paula's is weather. Kima has community helpers. Robin is food. Okay, so Do you have your paper ready to do some brainstorming? Samantha has flowers. So before we do that, I just want to share a couple of things on the CECPD website. And I did mention this in the email I sent out earlier. But if you scroll down to the bottom of this page where the QRIS videos are, there is a lesson planning video, and it has some good information for you, especially for what they'll be looking for in the lesson plans if you're in the STARS program. There's a PowerPoint that goes along with the video. There's a concept webbing, which is what we were just talking about, and it has like an explanation of it. And then it has a blank one. And this is what I was talking about with the teeny tiny little dots. That doesn't work for me. It also has some lesson plan templates. And we talked earlier about the individualizations. This has the front where you put your main lesson plan, on the back, which would be hidden to protect the child's privacy. It has the individualization. So the things you're going to do for those individual children. Then your evaluation, what worked well, what didn't. Any plans you might have for using this in the future. And then it has some more instructions on lesson plans. This is a Word document that you can download to your computer. Make sure that you enable editing, and then you can save a blank copy to your computer. And if you want to, you can fill it out on your computer. Some people like pen and paper, some people like computer. Again, whatever works for you. We're going to talk a little bit more about ELGs in a minute. I will say my theory on the early learning guidelines, using those in your lesson plans, it's best to I almost think it's better to overuse, note something on most activities, because that shows, one, that you know what you're doing and that you know what you're showing to the children, what you're teaching the children, but it also will make it easier, especially if you're participating in the QRIS, the STARS program, for you to be able to show your licensing worker, yes, this is what we're doing. These are the standards we're meeting. Before I forget, again, there is a, and Tricia, you may have to help me with this. There is a, it's called GWiz curriculum. Is that right, Tricia?
Yeah, it's GWiz. Then it has like all the lesson plans, and then it has all of the standards typed out for you. It has enhancement activities. It has everything you need for STARS.
Yes. And it's pretty reasonable, less than $200 a year. I looked at one of the providers that I work with, let me log in and look around hers. And honestly, I wish this had been available when I had family childcare, because the activities were so good and doable. Thank you, Tricia, for sharing. Okay, so now I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to brainstorm your web. Any questions before we start that? Oh, Tricia put the link in the chat. Thank you, Tricia. Any questions before you start your brainstorm web? If not, Go. I'll give you about 5 minutes and then I'll check in. Okay, just to check in, if you feel like you're done, put yes in the chat. If you feel like you need another couple of minutes, put a 2 in the chat. Okay, we've got some people that need a couple of more minutes, so I'm going to give you a couple of more minutes.
I'm trying to figure out how to type in this chat. All I see is a pencil thing.
Are you on a computer or a phone?
Phone.
Okay, if you're on a phone, if you go down to the bottom right-hand corner, there should be 3 little dots. And if you click on that, one of the options is chat, and you can open chat. The disadvantage to doing it on a phone is that you'll have to toggle back and forth because you can't see the chat and the me at the same time. And I am so sorry. I usually do like a brief tutorial about that at the first of the class, and I totally forgot.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to give you about 1 more minute. All right. Let's who wants to share? You don't have to share all of it, but who wants to share a little bit about their web? Any volunteers?
I'll share mine.
Okay, go ahead.
So I put insects, and I'm not sure exactly how you want to do this, but I just went through and wrote down every idea I could think of with insects. Bugs around the world, singing I'm bringing home a baby bumblebee, talk about the life cycle of insects, count the dots on insects, flat sight words, take magnifying glasses outside, talk where they live in the environment, similarities and differences between different insects, cutting insect.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. And just one thing, I don't have a way that I want you to do it or that you have to do it. You have to do what works for you. Thank you for sharing, Lauren. Who would like to share something next?
I will.
Okay, go ahead, Robin.
I put in the middle food, which you gotta look at the color, garden, shapes, grocery shopping, you taste it, and also cook it.
Okay. All right. Who else would like to share? I think we have time for 1 or 2 more.
I did community helpers, and then I just listed some like police officer, firefighters, mailman who delivers the mail, doctor, texts you when you're sick.
I really didn't know how to go about that.
Okay, that's a great start. Heather had a book she wanted to share with the person who chose flowers, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who that was.
I think it was Samantha. Yeah. Well, I was listening to this podcast the other day, and the lady that was talking, her name was Jahida Diab. I'm not sure how to say her last name. Sorry to tell you, it's only available on Kindle, but it's a beautiful story about inclusion and friendship. And it's called The Blended Garden. And the basis of the story is the lady gardening is like separating all the flowers. Like the dandelions were growing here, and then the tulips were growing here, and the roses were growing here. And they were like, no, we want to all be together. So in the end, she does let them all mix up together. It's just a really beautiful story about inclusion and friendship. And it was just really, really nice.
Thanks, Heather. All right, so now that you have your a little bit of webbing, we're going to talk about, I shared earlier on these are in your handout also, but on the CECPD website. Okay, is my screen up now where you guys can see it? The CECPD website?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Heather. So a couple of things. There's some different lesson plan templates. One thing I want to point out that has some great information on it is the lesson plan requirements for all star levels. Has information kind of broke down for what you need for the different star levels, and then some common reasons lesson plans may not be approved. So I thought that had some great information, and that's on the CECPD website under the links that I put in your handout. The other thing I wanted to share, come on. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to find it on this huge list of things. So. Well, we're just going to go with this because I can't get it to, okay. Is this lesson plan template with ELG focus, which I showed you a minute ago. Can you guys see this on your screen? Let me know. Can you see it? Yes. Okay. So what you'll want to do is if you want to, well, even if you just want to print it, you need to make sure that you enable editing. And then you can, so say your theme is, let's say pets. You can put your big idea there. Your goal here. Here, if you want, you can put what your ELG focus or your Oklahoma Academic Standard focus is. And then you can start plugging in some of your ideas. So if your theme was pets, what might a good large group activity for pets be? What might be something that you could do with pets? For large group, anybody?
You could ask the question, who has a pet and what pet they have.
Okay, so who has a pet? An outside activity might be moving like pets. Every once in a while, my keyboard just decides to add a whole bunch of random stuff. Okay, music and movement. You might, what's the name of that?
Your
Oh,
ears
the
hang
doggy
low.
in the
Do they wobble
window.
to the, do your ears hang low? Do your ears hang low?
Yes,
Do they
yeah.
wobble to and fro? You should know me. I got a song for whatever you.
I know you got a
figure out.
song for everything, right? In your reading center, you could list some of the books you want. So do you see how you can take some of the things you brainstormed and start transitioning that into your lesson plan? I need feedback, people.
Yes.
You
it works.
breaking up some.
Do what?
You breaking up.
I'm breaking up some. Am I breaking up for anybody else?
Not for me.
Not for me.
Okay. Okay. So it may be like an internet connection issue. So you can take some of the ideas you brainstormed and start plugging them in to your lesson plan very easily. And what I always found was once you start doing it, it tends to go quick once you start plugging in ideas. A couple of things about the ELGs. If you don't have a hard copy, they are available online. The links to both the 3 to 5 and the infant, toddler, and 2s are both in your handout. If you already feel you're comfortable and fairly knowledgeable about ELGs, put a yes in the chat. If you don't feel very confident about them, put a no in the chat. So yes, if you feel pretty confident, no, if you don't. Okay, I see a mixture. So let me just give a real quick overview. One thing I want to say is if you haven't taken the early learning guidelines training, I really encourage you to do it. And I really encourage you to do it in person because I feel like it is, now I can't say I haven't taken the online training, but I know the in-person trainings are so interactive and when I do them, like you have a complete lesson plan by the time you're done. So if we go through, by the time you're done with that class, you know these ELG books back and forth. So just a quick overview. Both are set up very similar. They have the rationale, which is the reasoning behind that learn in that concept area. They have the standard. Some areas have one standard, some have as many as 9 or more. And on the infant toddler book, it's broken up into young infant, mobile infant, and toddlers. And it has some things like if the baby is showing interest in and excitement with familiar objects, what are things you can do? Give them opportunities to explore sensory and describe what they're experiencing. By the way, if you need help with infant toddler planning and infant toddler ideas, Renee is our resident infant toddler specialist in North Central. Each area has their own infant toddler specialist. That's what they're here for, is to help you guys with infant toddler stuff. Right now, you have to like go to the link and request a coach to get help. But if it's related to QRIS, otherwise, you can just contact us and we will help you the best we can. Same thing with 3 to 5s. But anyway, and then it just goes on down. The thing I love about the early learning guidelines is they are very play-based. Once you start looking through them, you're going to be like looking at these ideas and thinking, I'm already doing this. But what this does is give you the wisdom to know what you're doing, and it helps you feel like an educator, as Heather said earlier, and helps you show parents and other people that you know what you're doing. The 3 to 5 is set up very similar as far as the rationale, the standards, and then it's got indicators of child's progress. So demonstrates an eagerness and interest in learning, your interests, your center play areas for a, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If child's interested in, if you have a child whose family is having a new baby, what are some things you might put in that center, in like your dramatic play center?
Lots of baby stuff.
Because that's going to be something the child is interested in. They're probably going to be talking about it, which is going to get the other children interested in it, and it gives you something to build on. So the early learning guidelines, they're all very interchangeable, and very interwoven is what I meant. Everything a child is learning is woven together. You know, they're not just learning math. If you're doing a cooking activity, think of all the things a child is learning. Health and safety. Hopefully they're washing their little hands. Hopefully you're washing your little hands. Communication, there's going to be some talking, right? Social emotional. Possibly some, definitely some math, some science. So a lot of your activities, a lot of things you do cover a lot of areas. And when you put them on the on your lesson plans, just, well, for example, basically it needs to make sense to you. So if say Paula from DHS comes in and says, you know, hey, I want to see your lesson plan, you know, what early learning guidelines do you have on there? And so say that you had I'm trying to find one real quick. So language arts. So you could put, and I'm going to put this in the chat, LA, language arts. And I usually suggest putting the page number just because I think it's a lot easier to find it by looking at the page number. So you can say, well, you know, this week we're working, or with this activity, we're working on language arts, standard 1, that on page 20. So what are your thoughts on that? Paula, what are your thoughts on that? I'm just going to throw you right under the bus, okay?
That's where I am still having the trouble grasping, making sure that I'm understanding ELG enough so that I can explain it to someone. I mean, I know that if it's on there, like if the LA and then page 20, it's hitting that, meeting that language arts requirement found on page 20. And then is your ST1, is that like your age group?
Standard 1.
Standard 1. Okay,
standard
so
1,
meaning
yeah.
standard 1, yes.
And that's the reason I said the page number, because then you can flip to the page number if you need to and say, hey, you know, this is what I'm doing. Again, I think that, I mean, any activity can meet multiple concept areas.
Right.
I mean, we could spend, you could spend hours just entering all of that on there. But just try to have a balance, an overview. You know, you don't want to get stuck just on health and safety, and you don't want to get stuck just on language arts. Make sure you have a variety. Any other thoughts or comments about that? Okay, so now what I want you to do is take the blank lesson plan that you had and start plugging in some ideas from your web into different areas on your lesson plan. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this up on the screen, and now I'm just putting up the 3 to 5. Actually, I'm gonna do the infant and toddler, because the infant and toddler I think has one more. They're very similar, so it really doesn't matter a whole lot. As far as like the concept areas are very similar, but on underneath like your activity, just write like what concept area you think that could meet. So like if you had a counting, somebody mentioned counting the legs on a bug, where do you think that would go? Just real easy. That is what concept area? Anybody?
Mathematics.
Math.
It's math.
So for what we're doing right now, I just want you to, like, if that's your activity, just write math or whatever, like MA, whatever works for you to trigger that's math. If you're going to do a, say an art activity, then you might put CS, creative skills. So basically all I want you to do right now is think about the different concept areas, and I'm going to give you just a few minutes, excuse me, to plug some of those in. Are there any questions about what we're doing before we start? If not, you're free to go to work on it. All right, so let's come back together. How do you feel after doing your brainstorming and then plugging some things into a lesson plan? How are you feeling about it?
Feeling good about it.
I heard feeling good, and then I heard something else, but I couldn't catch what it was.
It helped a lot.
It helped. I see it much
it
better
helps.
in the chat. And so all total, you spent probably 10 to 12 minutes on that. Do you feel like you have a good start on a weekly lesson plan just from that little bit you did tonight?
Yes.
Okay. So let's see where we are. So the reason to include the early learning guidelines, besides the fact that it's a requirement if you're in the QRIS program, is it ensures you're covering the different concept areas and meeting the different needs of the children. And it also shows parents, DHS, directors, what you're planning and why, and that you know what you're doing. So just a few minutes, a couple of minutes we're going to spend. Do you have any certain issues with lesson planning that you would like to get some input and ideas from other people in the class? Anybody? Or did I really teach you everything?
I'll go ahead.
And that was sarcasm, by the way. So
I feel like I probably have the least number of years under my belt. When I was going through it, I realized like what I had missed on my web, and I didn't have as much of the, I think it said the social development was one of them. And like,
right.
because I mean, I can do all the crafty and songs and like focus on letters and numbers, like that all just comes naturally. But I have noticed with like the group of kids I've had the last couple of years, like you really have to focus on social development. And if anybody has any advice on that, I would like to hear it.
All right. Anybody got anything for her?
Well, when we do our lesson plans at our school, we are required to do a social emotional activity every week. And so it can be a book, it can be how they play together, or doing a board game, taking turns and things like that. So if you have that already lined out to do a social emotional activity already planned in your lesson plan, regardless of what it is, it doesn't have to be anything big. It does help that you cover all those things. So if you just make you a list of the things that you know you want to include on that lesson plan, and always have, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything big and elaborate, but it's a board game teaches so many social skills of taking turns, and then it also does other things too. If you do some kind of little game they can do together, but reading a story together, or so there's lots of really neat books about social emotional and how their feelings and their moods, and you can just take it off and go. But because we're required, you know, I just have a list of all the things that have to go on my lesson plan, and I make sure I plug in an activity that's going to go and hit every one of those. And once you get into a practice of it, it becomes kind of second nature. You just, you know, you always think of different things that you can do with those. So I don't know if that helps or not, but that's what helps me. I have to have a list of what I'm going to plug in, and I try to make it go with the theme or the study that we're doing. But sometimes it just doesn't maybe go. It's just going to be a good activity that's going to promote that. So I think the more you do it, it just becomes second nature.
Thanks, Wava. Kelsey had put in the chat, including all ages in one lesson plan. Anybody have anything for Kelsey? And I have something I'm going to share with her from the CECPD website in just a minute. But I want to see, there's a lot of family child care providers in here. Anybody have any wisdom?
I don't have infants or toddlers, but we have a 3 through 5 year old age span. So knowing your individual needs, and just because you might have all 3-year-olds, you're still going to have different developments at where you're at. So they might be in the 2-year-old section. They may be. So you just have to know your kids, and then have activities that you can modify to make it very simple, or make it. You might have a 2-year-old that's way advanced, and you're going to have to offer some more advanced things for them. So just knowing your kids and being able to find activities that you can expand and make them harder or easier for whatever age group you have.
That's great wisdom. And that's one great thing about that GWiz curriculum that I was told about and that I looked at, is it has a lot of different like modifications for activities. Trisha said she modifies based on their skill level. Sometimes things need to be more advanced, and sometimes things need to be a little easier. And GWiz has school age. So if you have school age, what I was going to share here, and the link for the family child care curriculum, lesson planning stuff is also in your handout. But they have a sample lesson plan for birth to 5. And like feelings dice, roll the die and act out the emotion. Older children can mirror emotions with infant toddlers. So you're mixing the activities together. And then of course, like, you know, the books you're reading, you can read it to everybody. You may need to, I don't even know what I was going to say. So, transitions, music, anything like you're doing with that can be done with all age groups. Anybody else have any other wisdom for that?
Tracy, I was just thinking about people that have just started, and it can be so overwhelming trying to add all the stuff. I know I'm missing this, but just start off small. Make one big change and then slowly add to that. You don't be overwhelmed trying to make all these changes at once, because it can be so overwhelming. And you're going to do good just by making one big change. And then once you kind of get secure with that, go to the next one and make, and then pretty soon you have it all. You know, you're always learning something new, but you know, that's important to not, for people not to get stressed out and overwhelmed with trying to do lesson plans, because they can be, if you're just now starting out on them, and adding new things can be very overwhelming. So just start out small and just make those few changes, and then just keep adding changes as you.
Okay, thank you, Ava. So some of the things that we that you guys talked about that you needed for tonight were some being effective with lesson plans. Do you feel like we met that need?
Yes.
Information on writing a lesson plan, making a lesson planning easier. Do you feel like that we met that?
Yes.
Some different ideas, more ideas. Do you feel like you got some more things about lesson plans tonight? And trying to not overthink the ELG. Did I help with that any? I don't remember who said that. And then sticking to the lesson plan, which again, sometimes you have to follow the children's lead. Like if they're not engaged in an activity, you forcing it is not going to help. It's not going to make it very enjoyable. The objectives that I had were for you to learn about planning and implementing appropriate activities, and learn about incorporating children's interests throughout the curriculum. Do you feel like we met both of those? Do you feel like we met both of those objectives? Yes, Trisha, that's true. Flexibility, I do. I love that word too. And you can be flexible within a routine, you know? All right. Any other thoughts or comments on what we've covered tonight before we go on to the survey and the door prize drawing? Okay, I'm put the survey